like thinking, is everyone going to be really like badass dressed up right now?
Like Damara has an outfit on.
Oh, Damara always looks incredible.
Kerry, what have you got? We can see some moving action on yours. That's nice. Yeah, vibes.
You should just like bring your own videos as a background photo.
Great.
Because
Next time.
Damara.
Damara, everyone.
Long time no see. Love you.
Such a nice group.
Why we wanted to launch the Operator Salon is because there's so much happening in these spaces. Suddenly the fashion world is like merging with the digital art world, and we're having all these wild overlaps. I think people are working in fields and industries they never thought they would be in just because of a mix of COVID, tech, expansion. And we wanted to create a space to have conversations, not just about what's going on creatively, but also larger picture, what's going on, how is this affecting the world? How are these affecting how people are seeing themselves? And think about tech and culture from a bunch of different perspectives. And one of the most exciting things that I think that's happened in the last year from our perspective as artists working in the art and technology, digital art space is what's going on with digital fashion.
The background and the style of this conversation, we would actually like to not categorize it as a panel because it has a certain formality to it and a sort of official statements of the things that we do in the three sentence perfect, or the perfect one-liner of what you're working on.
Ideally, we'd all be like in an empty room drinking Negronis, just like,
yes,
yelling.
And smoking cigarettes, even though we don't smoke cigarettes.
For now, this will do, but we will do that version soon.
So yeah, I think, but we would like to hear a bit about what each of you are working on, and also maybe in a more raw sense to what unpolished things are you working on in terms of like the raw process questions you have for yourself as well. So if you could each give just a little thumbnail, and then also I think just feel free to debate, disagree, and we'll just kind of have a natural conversation.
So hi, my name's Scarlett, and I'm based in London. 3D fashion artist and also creative technologist. Do a bunch of different stuff involving technology and fashion. And my background is from fashion design at Central St Martin's in the UK and Royal College of Art, and also in engineering from Imperial College London. So I would say I work with like a more of a hybrid approach in digital fashion. And yeah, my mission, I say, is to bridge this extreme creativity with the state-of-the-art technology to really speculate and for a better fashion consumption, fashion experience, or fashion production. Yeah, some of my previous project is a combination of like physical material, bio design, generative design, machine learning, VR, and 3D. Yeah, for me, I actually work in both realms, the physical and digital. I don't think it really is in a black and white situation. And I'm currently working on, these are some of the physical work I do. Currently working on some NFT works and more design research and more like entrepreneurial startup projects, involving around fashion tech. So yeah, that's what I do basically.
So we just debate until we screen share. I suppose we can just give a little intro to what we do. So we're the Institute of Digital Fashion. So we're a pioneering new era institute, and we're really looking to push tech for a democratic tool for change. We found that there's a responsibility as makers, as thinkers in this digital landscape, as we move from the blur between the IRL and URL realities become smaller and smaller. But there's a responsibility to look at that we don't mirror some of the issues that fashion incubates, and then also to push for a more inclusive and diverse digital reality. And sustainability as well is a big conversation point currently in digital making. So we're very much looking at how we can innovate that space. Obviously the big NFT debates on sustainability. So we've been working, I suppose, with like fashion heads and tech heads to kind of come to a solution for some of the issues that like the archaic industry of fashion has an problem with. So yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose like if we were to go to like what we do, I mean, we cover like most things like digital fashion. We've recently done a project on digital couture where we were working with the physical atelier every single day, like to the point of changing a gem to have more facets in it or less facets. So like every single piece was looked at and scrutinized by the physical atelier. So we learned a lot from them. They learned a lot from us. And it was a crazy project. There was, but very rewarding at the same time. And the way that like it glistened within the environment, the actual animation at the end was like amazing. And then like digital humans, we do AR and VR, also loads of strategy for brands, etc., etc., etc.
It's very much from concept to consumer. So thinking we're working with the point of incubation of an idea, and as that goes all the way through from studio floor to shop floor, think about the end point and looking at where all these different points of innovation, and we're at such a monumental time right now where we really feel like, I mean, even just this panel today, it's really exciting for really exciting for everyone to have all of these minds and makers and thinkers in a space where we can all, look at what is the mass potential of our times right now, because I think it's a really historic moment. So we're really pleased to be here to be discussing what the future is.
Hello everyone, my name is Damara Inglês. I am a designer of extended reality experiences and virtual fashion. I'm a graduate of the MA of Fashion Media Practice and Criticism at the London College of Fashion, which means that I use technology as a lens to scrutinize and criticize the material fashion industry in ways of making it more sustainable, more diverse in dialogue. Most recently, I worked with brands like Gucci, Verizon, and in my latest project, I became an official lens creator for Lens Studio, Snapchat's Lens Studio, with the project Kazumbi, where I sort of started exploring two different points that are very raw still in my mind. But first is the notion of ethno-digitization, which is basically using technology as a tool to expand and express my own identity and complexity as an African woman in the diaspora and in the metaverse, and expressing digital identities and digital fashion beyond the Western-centric aesthetics. And the second point is digital tactility, which is basically if you have a filter and there's a spider climbing up your face, you will scratch it out and feel a little bit of itch. And it's basically that extended hyper sense that comes to place where you are able to see your body in the digital mirror in real time. And you can almost feel the physical presence of a digital element that is not really there. And for me, it's very exciting to see how digital tactility will change the way we express digital fashion as well, more towards mental health and therapy. And yes, as Leanne said, I agree, we're definitely living in a very historical moment. And I'm so excited to be part of this revolution with all of you.
We're coming back to digital tactility.
Yeah, we're definitely coming back to digital tactility.
Lovely to meet you all. I've been working in fashion from the age of about 21. I did a degree in visual communication design, and then I went on to work in advertising. And throughout the course of my career, I've worked on traditional fashion shows, and I recently collaborated with Gary James McQueen on the first of its kind digital fashion show. It's a 10-minute cinematic film experience, which we did in collaboration with Myosa and Unreal Engine. So we benefited from an Epic Games mega grant. And we also partnered with DressX to give ourselves the opportunity to be able to sort of view a digital collection straight on the runway and then literally go straight through to purchase, which was obviously the first of its kind. And my mission really has been to make fashion more inclusive and accessible, and give, you know, working with designers to give them the tools to kind of have the resources to extend their portfolios in a very sustainable and creative way. I think what I love about working in digital technology and fashion is that the opportunities are boundless. And I think giving designers that scope to use tech to really sort of push their creative limits is just incredibly exciting. And it's just an incredibly exciting field to be in, because it's just moving so quickly. And yeah.
Thanks so much for having me. Really great to be part with such talented people. So I'm Kerry. My background is in film and visual effects. I worked in advertising industry for over a decade. Absolutely hated it, simply because it doesn't really have like purpose and impact. You know, a lot of the stuff that we do in advertising is focused on like charitable organizations, but actually a lot of that need is to win awards and, you know, just like do like cool projects with cool brands. And I realized that fashion had not really gone through digital transformation or really utilized digital at its full capacity. And so I just brought the tools from the film and visual effects industry and started collaborating with my co-founder, Amber, who's a digital-only fashion designer. And we started creating images like my background right now, which is a digital-only fashion collection that we presented in Paris, Amsterdam, and Maastricht at the same time, because that's the true value of digital. You don't need to ship samples anywhere. To come back to Leanne's point about sustainability, it's massive. Digital-only fashion, for me, is going to be the sustainable revolution of the fashion industry, simply because we can replace a lot of the physicalities of fashion production with digital methods. However, the true focus with the Fabricant is to be a fully fledged digital fashion house where we get to be digital-only fashion designers and create designs that are super creative, really with a backbone of technology. You know, we also utilize Unreal Engine, tools from the visual effects industry, but you know, the tools need to be invisible when it comes down to the execution of the fashion, and the fashion really needs to be intact with that true focus on the craftsmanship and on the small details. And I think everybody in this room is really focusing on that, and I think that's simply what's going to accelerate the digital-only fashion language. And then the biggest challenge for digital-only fashion industry is having those business models, having a proper business model so digital-only fashion designers and digital-only fashion companies can scale and, you know, start competing against the traditional fashion brands themselves to become more sustainable, to become more innovative, and to become more creative than traditional fashion is. And it definitely has that opportunity simply because of the sustainability side, plus also the scalability side. So if you think that a fashion brand, the business model is so much focused on selling more physical clothing. So the only way for a fashion brand to grow is by selling more physical clothing. But for the fashion industry to become more sustainable, we need to reduce the amount of physical clothing, because there's numbers being thrown around like that the fashion industry produces more than 100 billion items per year. So, basically saying that there's clothing for everybody for the next 50 years if we start fashion production right now. So that's why there's just a lot of opportunity and a lot of richness in digital-only fashion. And that's why I'm super excited about it. Plus also just creating images that are just way more creative, way more richer. Scarlett, I didn't know about your work from before, but the stuff that you showed is incredibly beautiful. You know, so that's kind of like, you know, like the language that's coming out right now, that's really gonna start making the digital-only fashion industry much more exciting than the physical industry, at least for me. And I'm not a fashionista, and what digital-only fashion industry allows me to do is to take part in the community, in the culture, because I'm just a simple guy who wears simple black t-shirts and that doesn't feel comfortable going out into the streets, you know, wearing extravagant stuff like Leanne, respect, you know. I want to be able to do that, but in my digital life, I can do that. But in my physical life, I just don't feel comfortable with it just yet. But my digital life is teaching me about my physical life to become a little bit more expressive and maybe take some more risks. So that's us in short.
Hello, everyone. Happy to participate in this discussion. My name is Olga, and I'm actually not from the fashion industry. I spent my first 10 years of my career in industrial projects, managing them. And little by little, I switched to the sustainability aspect of those projects and to the sustainability as a subject. And when I met Daria and Natalia, the founders of DressX, and when I learned about the idea of the digital fashion, I said that this is such an amazing opportunity to make the fashion industry sustainable. And let's make a research and let's show to everyone and promote this idea of the sustainability in fashion industry through the digital fashion. So this is how I entered the digital fashion industry. And to talk about the DressX, so we are the largest store for digital only garments. And we sell both 3D and traditional fashion designers. Right now we are working on the app to make the digital fashion more instant and to help our customers not to wait for example, 24 hours to get their digital garment back to them, but to make it instant. And our whole idea is to make, when people think about the fashion industry, when people think about wearing clothes, it's stop to make them thinking only about physical garments, but to think straight away about digital and physical garments and to understand where they can use digital garments and where they can use physical garments. And like Kerry said, for example, in everyday life, we can wear just only black t-shirts to go outside, but we can create our digital selves where we can build our identity using digital fashion. And the whole idea behind that, to make fashion more sustainable, to use less resources, and to help to reduce production and consumption of physical garments.
It's interesting that not from, I think, within fashion, but a lot of people outside of fashion have this idea that fashion is something that might be shallow or just about aesthetics and not have any depth, but also everyone's introduction. There's so much drive behind what you're doing that is so the opposite of shallow. Like it has more grounding and more ethics and more critical thinking embedded into your structures and your processes than I've seen like in many other areas. That I was wondering if you guys can speak to basically identity and fashion and how these things, like what Damara was talking about with new senses, that you're learning about yourself through digital tactility and actually finding new versions of yourself, like Kerry said, extensions of yourself, and how that can be reclaimed through digital fashion rather than it being a kind of like shallow endeavor.
I'll have a go. I'll definitely say that I think that digital fashion is based on a completely different set of values to what physical or material fashion is based upon. And digital fashion is a direct response to everything that was lacking in the physical fashion industry. So I do understand this parallel between fashion being known as superficial, although I think that there's nothing superficial about traditional fashion, apart from the supply chain systems and obviously all the beauty ideals that are hyperimposed on people. But as a digital fashion practitioner that turned to digital fashion as a direct response or as a form of activism against the limitations of physical fashion, I definitely see that creating an identity in a metaverse is a way more intimate process, because as Kerry was saying, you can wear a black t-shirt on the street and you can be the craziest person online. And the confidence and the identity that this digital persona carries can also be translated into your physical identity. And that's where I think that digital fashion can really influence physical fashion, in terms of sensation, in terms of what's the goal of all of this experience. And turning to digital tactility, working with the 3D body tracking on Land Studio and with the chain physics script, you can very easily just add a few points to a garment. And then as you turn your body, it just starts jumping around your body and sort of twirling around you. And it really does create another layer of self-perception and being. So if I have my phone in the selfie mode and a tripod and I'm wearing this experience and I can see it in my body in real time, it's a completely different experience from the one of wearing a physical garment. So a physical garment, I want it to be comfortable. I want it to maybe be tight, but look super hot. But what do we want on a digital garment? And how can we make digital fashion so that it's based upon not so shallow values? Like just looking at the image on Kerry's background and seeing this amazing textile flowing around, like this is already making me feel super relaxed. So I can't even imagine the sensation of wearing this in the first person in a virtual reality environment or in an augmented reality setting.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting what you're saying, Damara, and like the about the tactility. And we've found that, you know, there seems to be two separate conversations going on, and that the link between the, you know, physical fashion house, their understanding of I suppose we're all in the industry, we're all part of the cogs that are turning to create the wave. And so the conversations we're having here today will be super interesting because these are all the incremental parts. But and predominantly when you are talking to a fashion house, they're not only confused but a bit bewildered about the differences between the two, how the two can unite, what that means. So like work like yours and seeing this kind of and what you talk so poetically about, and what we're kind of looking at with IODF is that, but what is digital fashion, and like how can it embody a new experience and one beyond the experiences that primarily exist in the fashion universe. And I think that's what's really exciting right now, is that we're like thinking of using on all these new technological developments, that we see that you can wear digital fashion and you can live and breathe within it, and the action of breathing can actually be being shown within the garment, you know, and that's really wonderful. And to think about the fact that your body can, the way that it moves, responds, or just functions, can directly translate into a digital asset that it can respond to. And that's the beauty of the arena that we're working within, all of us here, is that there's limitless potential. And within the physical world, there's specific restraints like gravity, for instance, that'll, you know, damn gravity. Well, gravity doesn't exist where we're making, you know, and we can really push the boundaries. And that's so big for a fashion house or the marketing team to deal with, you know, whether it's like, oh, we want to do a project with digital fashion, they want you to mirror it and replicate it. But so for us, it's really interesting to see how this will kind of play out, and where all of our kind of minds and our energy for this new mode of communication and thinking and making, where that's going to go.
Leanne, Ania and I also in our practice really, you know, push to not just mirror what you can do in the physical, but take the digital in a completely different direction and have it either interact or have some fluidity between the digital and physical. Talking about the expansive qualities that digital worlds can provide us, I have a question for you, which is, where do you see the fluidity between digital and physical, and where is physical useful to digital, if at all?
I think we can't negate the physical world at all, and of the physical making, and I think that the digital, I suppose it depends how the collaboration or the conversation, how they incubate one another. But I think there's so many different constellations of this digital fashion conversation. One is how you can work with a fashion house to aid their creative development. i.e. working in some of the softwares in which we all work within. So it gives them the ability to, I think the one thing is like, oh, well, is it all going to be, you're working on a machine, and it means that you're kind of not going to be able to like see the expansive physical reality when I create a toile. But there are some like shortcuts, you know, being able to, at a tap of a button, to look at an archival fabric, or to see what a drape and a flow by using geometry and physics, what a velvet looks like or a silk looks like on that pattern. Those things are shortcuts. So it means that the digital atelier and team have more time to think creatively about other parts of the garments. That's like one incremental part of digital fashion. We're really interested in digital layering and how you can take a physical showcase and layer that with more information on the brand. That it lends itself to transparency, so more information on things like sustainability, etc. And we all know that, you know, we all work visually, so being able to represent some of the mood boards and the real the creative flow of the designer, and be able to show that within and it being layered upon the garment itself. So it's not just the physical, but it has the extras, so you're kind of seeing the two in the one space. And I think that's a really interesting positioning point, is the fact that we hope in a very, I mean, it's occurring right now, but it's still not commonplace, that we'd be able to reflectively see the two worlds existing as one. So a digital garment and a physical garment work alongside one another, and they're not jarring, or it's not a segue between the two, that they do, you know, breathe within one another. But I think your point was like, your question was like, what the point of the physical?
Question's irrelevant.
No, can I add to that thinking, because I think it's valid, and I love that question as well, because typically the question is, how is digital, you know, affecting physical? But basically your question is the other way around: how is physical affecting digital? Which is super interesting idea. And just to add to Leanne's thinking, you know, it's like they're going to start blurring, they're going to start connecting to each other. And I think the biggest prediction is that, you know, soon we're going to have like our glasses, and they're going to have an AR layer in those. And that's when physical items will actually, you know, start working together with digital items. And I think when you look at it historically, I mean, digital fashion is so new. Everything that we know for digital fashion is basically taken from physical fashion. You have to understand the foundation and the craftsmanship of fashion construction, you know, product creation, you know, how do the patterns work? How do you stitch them together? How do you create the shape, you know, draping and fitting, and all those things from the fashion industry, they are in the digital fashion industry as well. So basically digital took everything from the physical fashion industry and made it digital. Now digital is adding value on top of the physical and taking it somewhere where physical can't be, you know. Yeah, gravity is one of those things. We just don't have it. We have full control. It's that age-old cliche of your imagination is your limitation in the digital world. And then once we're going to start having more of this AR layer in our lives, that's when we're going to start seeing them working with each other. And, you know, we always, like our North Star with the company is the saying that everybody will just have one physical item in their physical lives, and there will be a digital layer. And, you know, you can be at a party, you can feel uncomfortable at the party, and you just download another dress simply because you can. So we're going to start seeing kind of like these boundaries working with each other, where physical is going to inspire digital, and digital is going to inspire physical, and it's going to work hand in hand. That's how I see it.
I would like to add that definitely physical fashion inspires digital fashion in so many different layers, from sensations to processes to craft. We cannot deny the thousands and thousands of years of craftsmanships and ways of doing things that we still carry on us until today. And we can definitely not deny all the different cultural niches that still did not have the time to express themselves even through mainstream physical fashion in that sense. Because I think when we talk about physical fashion, we talk a lot about European fashion and Paris Fashion Week and all of these things, and really negating a whole generation of, for example, African designers that is coming up, like Shers Bonner or Moa Wala, that definitely also have a voice. I think that the connection between physical and digital fashion is that there's so much that physical fashion has given us that we definitely do cannibalize it and take it into digital fashion. But there's also so much that physical fashion has given us that we don't want. And I think that's also a huge part of what influences the values and the ethos of many of the digital fashion practitioners, specifically us that are here. I agree that they will be blending and merging more and more. I definitely think that in the near future, the person will be able to buy, for example, the Fabricant t-shirt or jumpsuit, and then be able to wear all of the different garments in real time through an augmented reality lens. And actually, these are very exciting news. The Snapchat just launched the new specs, which basically allows the user to see augmented reality in real time. So it's augmented reality glasses where you can see augmented reality in real time. And you can attach symbols or images. So if you had the Fabricant t-shirt, for example, and I'm wearing my glasses, then I point at you and I instantly see the exact Fabricant garment that you decided to wear today. And I think that's beyond, and this is a completely new era of physical and digital fashion merging. But on the other hand, we also have to understand that the fact that digital fashion is based on different values, and the niche and metaverse of digital fashion also has to be respected. And we sort of have to be careful to protect these factors, this little embryo that we are building from major fashion corporations that cannot wait to kill digital fashion so they can just move on with their regular practice.
What's the #1 thing that everyone thinks that should be protected, this embryo? What's inside the embryo? If everyone could just give us.
What do you most want to reserve and protect that's there now that you're afraid might get challenged?
Rapid fire.
I think craftsmanship, creativity. I think what was interesting about working with Gary James McQueen is he was able to single-handedly produce a 20-piece fashion collection, which you could never do physically. You know, sampling the tailoring, sampling the textures, the colors of the fabric without physically producing anything, and then showcasing an entire collection where you can actually kind of base it on supply and demand. So, you know, when we're talking about sustainability and production and cost saving, that the speed with which you can do that and the expense that you save is enormous. And I think that is something that the traditional fashion world needs to embrace. I think they're quite fearful of the technology because it obviously requires a completely different skill set to the traditional one. And I think that's been a big barrier. But the beauty of working with Gary James McQueen as an example was that he had the traditional fashionable background, having worked with his uncle at the house of Alexander McQueen on traditional fashion shows, but also had a graphic design background and was very well versed in very cutting edge technology to really push the boundaries and kind of marry the two. And I love the fact that, you know, fashion is basically a form of art. It is an expression. It's you know, Gary's fashion show is very much, there's a big narrative, there's a story behind it. You know, he created his own metaverse in Unreal Engine. And I think, you know, using technology to do your storytelling and enhance your collection and, you know, what you're trying to convey, having that, the resources to do that in such an immersive way, I think is just fantastic that fashion houses can now begin to embrace the tech and take it on.
I was just going to say community and collaboration. Right now, the fashion industry is elitist. It has a front row, you know, and part of our work is the Institute of Digital Fashion is looking at how we can democratize that space, but also how we can collaborate and keep this community of, because the digital making community is such a interesting space. There's, you know, it's like no boundaries, and everyone speaks a very different language, and it's all very tight and close knit. You know, because there was only until recently, there was only a few people that were kind of working in that space. Obviously, like Cattytay, who's just there. Their work was, and forming DigiGirl. That energy for all of those, all of those that creative collaboration with no real parameters, and none of the structures that the fashion industry or our reality has, and just kind of blowing the doors off. Like you can do what you want when you want, and it really that energy is so exciting. I think that as we step into working more with fashion houses, and it becomes about strategies and new modes of consumption, and it becomes business orientated, what we don't want to lose is that raw energy of creative collaboration and conversations that were going on, which were pure, and the fact that anyone with a laptop or, you know, a home set studio, anyone can be involved in that. And that's what, I suppose, us as an institute, we want to collaborate. We have open doors. We want to educate. So we want to kind of give those tools, which is why we, Institute of Digital Fashion, are partnering with the stakeholders in these conversations. You know, making sure the tech companies and software companies are allowing the software not to be at a rate that means that certain individuals aren't going to be able to, you know, work with that software or be part of the conversation. So I think that's it really. I think from our side is that creative collaboration, and the kind of the endless room, and how big that room was with no doors, you know, and that everyone's in and involved. And I think that's be a shame for it to not still have that energy, because it's really fun as well.
Yeah. I think on your point, Leanne, of inclusivity, I think, you know, sizing is a real issue in fashion. And historically, you know, you look at a runway collection and, you know, a size 24 can't buy straight off the runway. But in the digital world, they can. And, you know, just like they can have a front row seat, they can also wear anything, genderless, size is irrelevant. And I think that just opens up the doors of fashion, like you were just describing, and as it should, and it should be for everyone. And also that the pricing issue is important. I know it was for Gary and I on our project. You know, historically, if you're looking at a runway collection by a very high-end designer, you're talking about, you know, you need deep pockets to be able to access, you know, those pieces, and you also need to kind of be local to where you might be able to, you know, go to your Harrods or your Selfridges like I am in London. But, you know, and that's the brilliant thing about doing it all online and making it accessible. Suddenly it's affordable, and they can get it with great speed, which was, you know, why our partnership with DressX was so fantastic, because suddenly the collection had a global reach and the price point was affordable.
I think democratization definitely plays a massive role in digital fashion. And like I talk to a lot to gaming peeps and blockchain bros, and for them fashion is black hoodies and black t-shirts and nothing more. They don't understand, let's say, the true kind of fashionista background. And I think digital fashion is an invitation for everybody to take part in it, to be part of that culture, and to truly understand the craftsmanship that goes into the production of digital only fashion. It is not a gimmick. It's a different form of craftsmanship. It's a tool that we all need to learn and really utilize in the best way to tell the narratives that we have. But now we just need to educate people, because honestly, my biggest challenge right now is to teach the blockchain pros what fashion means, is to teach gaming peeps that it's far richer, and, you know, there's much more value in digital only clothing to express your own storytelling, to express your unique identity and see yourself as more fluid than just somebody who just wants to wear comfortable clothing and be stuck behind the computer. Because one day we're going to have those 20 avatars that we have to think like, okay, what are we going to dress ourselves in? And yeah, the digital space is going to be way more fun than the physical spaces.
But you're right, Kerry, and if we're talking about the gaming community, you know, the younger generation is so used to dressing their avatars in the gaming community, and that's kind of what we were trying to demonstrate in our partnership with Epic Games. It's like, this is now going to become mainstream. I think is super exciting. Like you said, you can be much more adventurous in your digital wardrobe than you would with your physical. So it's fun and games, right?
I just wanted to say one random thing connected. I don't know where it was a connection of, but it was just in my head that I think us as a group and community, we need to work on the slight contradiction sometimes between it being more accessible that clothing is cheaper, but then we also need to, then there's the contradiction of that, and then there's the contradiction of the craftsmanship and the makers behind who's making it. And I think that's something that we need to work out, like digital fashion to be cheaper, to be accessible, but we don't want to replicate the problems within fast fashion. We always, just need to think about the makers, basically. It's like, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, and I know that there are a lot of examples where people saying, why should I pay like $50 for a digital garment? It's just Photoshop. And we have to explain to our final customers that actually it's not just a Photoshop, and that the person who stays behind this creation, he or she spent a lot of time to learn the techniques, the tools. And remember that Gary McQueen said that he wouldn't create this collection if he didn't know the tools, the software. So this is what we need to explain to the customers, that it's actually takes a lot of time to get there and to create the textures and the quality.
Yeah, Cattytay, I just wanted to dive in more to what you just said, because I was about to ask you prior to that. So we learned about DigiGal through our friend Harriet while we were at an artist residency with her at Factory Berlin.
Harriet Blend, yeah.
So it's great to meet you. But I'm thinking about, so from the physical fashion traditional side of things, there's a benefit to go into digital. But I think of digitally native artists and the role. Here we are at CADAF, we're at a crypto and digital art fair, right? So a lot of what is the role of the digital art world? And also when I say the art world, I would say more digital artists and natively digital artists' role in fashion, and how, because they're coming from completely different perspectives.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
I think, I mean, in terms of like the physical fashion world, learning from places like DigiGirl, for example, like a lot of emails that come through are like, we just want it to look digital. Like, have you got any makeup artists, but make it look digital? And we get references all the time from DigiGirls, like work, like we love this. So physical fashion has completely absorbed digital, like in every way, aesthetically, ways of doing things with COVID. It's helped so much as well, because people didn't really necessarily take it seriously, but now everyone's like, oh my god, like we haven't got a show, we need a show. So yeah, I don't think that quite answers your question though. What was the question? Sorry, it went on a rampage.
Fashion is an art form. I don't see there being any difference. I think, you know, it's all within the creative realm, and whether it comes under a fashion umbrella or it's hanging as a piece of art or hanging on your body, to me it's kind of irrelevant. They're both creative pieces, and it's just whichever way you choose to demonstrate them, really.
I think I mean, there's so many makers in DigiGirl that don't have a fashion background, but what they bring to it is the art side, or is the 3D side, and that is what creates the shapes and like things that like physical fashion have never seen before. So yeah, it's good.
Going on this idea of kind of digital artisanship, which I read a bunch about on IODF's site, which I thought was really interesting, and goes back to Cattytay, what you mentioned about the price point and being like, this is great because it's always going to be cheap, and then remembering the labor that goes into making it. And that there is like an artisanship, there is a knowledge of tools, there is an education to know how to use the tools, how to become an expert in using them, how to get creative with them once you know how to actually use them. And so Maybe Scarlett, can you speak to some of the way that you think craftsmanship goes into when you're making a digital piece, and how you would think about if you're going to sell that, how you price it? Like, how many hours does it take? What is the kind of artisan side of a garment that you would make, and how can that inform this question of price and accessibility?
Yeah, I was going to say, I was going to say about the one question you were asking, which is really related to what you're talking about now, which is like, what do we want to preserve, right, in digital fashion? And I think is that creative edge of this creator, which is what Cattytay was just talking about. And so I think it really depends, of saying pricing this item, digital item. Well, obviously it depends on, there are different ways to consume it, really. If you want to consume it straight only in digital in the form of an NFT, or is it just a representation of a physical product, or it could potentially be, but it might not be at that moment. So I think is really difficult to say. In general, it really depends on the situation, and say how many hours. I think this is the bit as different from physical fashion production. Physical production, okay, you have to stitch stitch the garment one by one, lines one by one, hour by hour. But in virtual, you don't, because you have to learn the software, have to buy the plugin that you probably use, and then you will have to iterate and you delete it, but then you still have done already that work. So I think I don't really have a definite answer for that, but it's definitely not going to be the same type of pricing mentality as in physical production. Yeah.
It's almost like there's, for physical fashion moving into digital, there's a solve because the production pipeline, sort of consumerism aspect of this, there's a way to streamline that and create maybe more profit, more sustainability, and it solves some issues there. But it seems like maybe it challenges some issues from the creative side, the digitally native side, where this is a more labor intensive practice, as you're describing, Scarlett. And so how does that undermine the digitally native community? And what can we do? When I'm going back to Damara's question of how are we going to protect the embryo? I think maybe this is an unpopular conversation too, which was one of the questions we wanted to go around the table and ask and say, what's your most unpopular statement about digital fashion? But I just want to challenge this and stir it up a little bit here.
It depends who the audience is, if you're talking to a fashion brand and you talk anything digital only fashion, they're already, not happy about it. I saw yesterday somebody on LinkedIn say okay, digital fashion is more sustainable and more scalable than physical fashion is. And then there was a whole lot of comments of people just going on a rant of what about the people in the world who don't have computers or don't have smartphones, who don't have access to digital only fashion? It's just so it kind of in our Western world, we're so used to having all these privileges, and we just kind of forget about the things that maybe 80% of the world don't have. So I think it really comes down to just knowing who you're speaking to. If you would really want to give an unpopular statement, go talk to people who come from marginalized communities who don't have the privileges that we have when working in this industry. Because to be working in digital only fashion, to be making money from digital only fashion, for me is a massive privilege.
Yes, I definitely want to add up to that point. Going back to what we would want to preserve on the embryo, for me, it's definitely future dreaming and abstract future dreaming beyond the capitalist, matrix, which I think we all sort of there already. But also the notion of diversity, and that because digital fashion is a new thing and everybody feels that they can participate in building it, and Kerry is super right, that is not true. And actually, we don't even know if maybe physical fashion is more accessible as a tool, because I know that in Angola, people learn how to sew when they are 6, 7 years old in their grandmother's backyard, right? But I don't know who has access to computers. Coming directly from Angola, we have lots of power shortages. So it's impossible to keep an entire room of digital fashion production without an energy generator, which is also very expensive. Then access to the internet is extremely expensive, because being a corrupt country, obviously government do not want people to have cheap access to information. So digital fashion is not that accessible, but I think that we can definitely make it more. I think it has the potential to surpass physical fashion. And talking about Dejha Girl, oh my God, what a community that completely changed my life. I don't even think that I would be working in digital fashion today if I haven't found a community of people that would just be freely and willingly exchanging skills, tricks, and concepts. Something that I've been thinking a lot about lately is to open a sort of 3D design studio in Luanda, but obviously I would need a grant for that to build a studio and have continuous access to the internet, and also potentially have a lawyer to fight in case the government thinks that I'm trying to overreach their authority by empowering youth with the digital skills.
We'll message you after, Damara. We've got a project. Yeah. We'll message you after.
I definitely be connecting with some people. That it's great for me as an African woman to be here in this room. I understand that it's a massive privilege. And how do I then take this privilege back home and build a seed of knowledge there that can potentially give access to privilege to other people? And when we're talking about developing countries, there is no time to go through the first industrial revolution, the second industrial revolution. We have to start at the point where everyone else is. And for that, we need a lot of support. So that's what I would like to preserve more about digital fashion. But that's also what I would like to see growing more in digital fashion, which is acknowledging that most of the world population do not have access to these technologies, and that we can empower them directly.
Damara, I can understand you and I can relate. I spent 3.5 years in Central Africa, and I can see all the issues you just mentioned. I lived there, so I know about the power shortage. And also, it's not only about the resources, like you don't have access to the internet and you don't have access to the electricity. It's also about kind of education and explaining. So if you just come to the Angola or to the Congo where I stayed, and you start to explain this concept and you say, hey guys, this is the digital fashion. And we say, we would like you to wear less physical garments and to switch to the digital ones. They won't understand you. They will look at you and say, well, you're talking nonsense. So it's also about the education and explaining to the people the concept and why do we want it, we want to do it.
Yes, I think that I understand your point, but it's very complex because there are several layers of interaction. So in Angola, you have lots of people that are very poor, but have smartphones and are always on Snapchat and wear all the Snapchat filters. So they would potentially understand it. And also for me, empowering people with tech skills is not necessarily from the perspective of the consumer, it's mostly from the perspective of the producer. So how can 3D fashion skills get to Africa before Inditex does, and before, you know, a whole community is basically indulged in modern slavery to produce fast fashion garments, versus the same community having 3D fashion design skills. And I mean, someone that lives in a house made of brass could literally create a garment, because if that person already knows how to design a pattern, from that to clothes 3D is not such a big jump. So definitely there would have to be many different layers of introduction and interaction. And I think that these challenges are the most exciting part when it comes to digital fashion. Being in developing countries or being here where we are right now, that we still have to educate a lot of the audience in relation to what digital fashion means.
But also what you said, Olga, I mean, that's what, if you said to anyone, I always use like my like grandmother and then my father as like a kind of like point. If I talk to them about the project we're working on and they don't understand it, I know that it's gonna be really innovative, but I also know that perhaps we have to change our press release a little bit. But you know, it's like, if you said to anyone, oh, stop wearing normal fashion and wear more digital fashion, they still wouldn't understand it. And that's what I mean. We're all around this table talking like about the kind of these innovation points, but we are at the kind of nucleus point, because still we're not at a time where you can realistically and wear digital fashion in the way that we wear, or the way that Damara talks about digital fashion. There's not that energy for it and love and understanding of it yet.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Damara, I love what you said also about not seeing, say, Africa as just a big market, but bringing Africa into the site of production and creation at the very beginning, like when this is establishing, as being so important, because I think that's a lot of times it's missed. It's not, I mean, academia is going through this crisis right now. Like, why is my syllabus so white movement? Where it's like, why are we pretending like we're having these conferences about development and sustainability and like all the knowledge is just coming from the West? That is something that I think here at this, like Leanne said, nucleus and this like embryo stage of digital fashion, taking on, like Damara, what you said is really crucial, and it is totally possible to lay the foundation for this to totally grow in a way that let's say physical fashion hasn't been that inclusive and hasn't been engaging the rest of the world.
Olga, I have a question for you specifically. Large scale computing, so cloud computing, a lot of the resources that digital fashion relies on, there are issues in terms of extraction, not only data extraction to better sell back to customers and target, not to mention surveil certain populations, but also the extraction of earth materials, labor conditions in terms of in the entire computing sort of pipeline and chain from start to finish. I know you've done a lot of research within sustainability, and it's fascinating, and thank you for the work you've been doing. Do you have any perspectives on sustainability as it ties to large scale computing and some of these issues of sustainability there?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question, and thank you for the comments. Yeah, well, right now, what is actually I'm doing for this year in DressX is exactly this research. I'm trying to understand how digitizing and going into the digital world or AR world can influence to our to the using of the resources. What is it actually a way to have different industries to get different industries more sustainable or not? And well, the first question I am having is that we store our data in the data centers. And the first question I should ask is that, are the data centers sustainable? Are they actually good for the environment or not? So to build more data centers, for example, we need to destroy forests in some countries. They use a lot of energy to cool the data centers. So this is the very first question we should ask, and I'm actually working on that right now. So I don't have an exact answer to your question at the moment, but definitely there is a side which we have to look at and we have to research.
So just to kind of wrap up, I'm curious, a couple of things, if we can each just speak to them, ideas about critiques based on kind of what Dejha was mentioning of digital fashion, especially if it has blockchain integration and the kind of environmental sustainability problems. I know Ethereum is working on like ETH2, and there's more environmentally sustainable blockchains like Tezos, and so there's a lot of movement. How have you been thinking about sustainability within digital, and if there's been any critiques thrown your way about it not being sustainable for other reasons than physical fashion. Is that something you're thinking about? And then any closing remarks? And thank you all so much.
We hired a chief sustainability officer at the Fabricant, who's working together with Olga at the moment, you know, seeing what is the environmental impact of introducing NFTs into digital fashion production. Previously, we had a similar type of report as DressX did, where we presented that the digital-only fashion production is 3% of physical fashion production. However, once you introduce NFTs onto it, it's going to change everything. So that's the metrics that we need to find out about. And what we're doing at the Fabricant is carbon offset with a company called Offsetra, where all of the drops that we're doing, we're actually donating parts of the money to Offsetra for them to do carbon offset. So that I don't know if there's any other initiatives that to really, you know, keep pushing that forward, but that's as far as we've gotten. And we're going to keep pushing more awareness around it and seeing what we can do about it too.
Yes, we did an independent research for the digital fashion, and we also showed that the production of the digital garments emits only 3% in comparison to the production of the physical garment. So we are aligned with Kerry and the Fabricant on that. The idea is that, yes, Ethereum right now is not sustainable because they work on the proof of work, and that requires a lot of energy. Ethereum said a couple of years ago that they're going to release the second version, which will working on the proof of stake. And actually, this is what we need to push. When we will move from proof of work to the proof of stake, the efficiency of the blockchain and the minting will increase on 99%. So we will decrease enormously the carbon footprint. And then the second stage, so once you have your efficiency, the second stage is offsetting the rest of the carbon footprint. We are also working with Offsetra. Well, since we're all together on that project, we work together with Offsetra on the different projects, how we can buy carbon credits and offset our activity.
We're also exploring right now the sustainability conversation with NFTs, and are working with a queer female who's very deep in the crypto and space, who's working with us on some really innovative strategies that the mining, we'll call them teams, but they're teams, are using, which is looking at hydropower and also wind as well, because there's a difficulty in harvesting any of those energy sources. So looking at how you can work alongside those spaces to harvest that energy and use to build the offset energy effectively to build spaces there to work and to mine within. So that's really exciting, and that's also in collaboration with a publication, a global publication, who are launching an NFT forum. So yeah, so that's hot off the press, but a little nutshell there, but yeah, coming soon.
Amazing. Anyone else on the sustainability question?
Sustainability or not
sustainability or not sustainability, or I loved, Leanne, when you said that fashion is like the Titanic and it's too big to turn. I was laughing for like 10 minutes. Just a shout out. So any final closing remarks, thoughts? Go ahead, Scarlett.
Yeah, I was gonna say, for me personally, I haven't been investigating the sustainability part in NFT. But I have been doing sustainable design alongside my digital approach research, which is to use digital fashion simulations to predict and analyze the life cycle of like physical production, and then to ensure that you're really minimizing the material waste, combining with life cycle analysis, LCA. Which is scientific method. I've been consulting with Imperial College and also material science of the material that you're choosing, which I think in this aspect, digital fashion really is helping sustainability, although not an NFT.
I would like to say that I've had some criticism in relation to the sustainability of my practice, but not in relation to directly energy and etc. But in relation to cultural appropriation, I've had people ask me if I feel comfortable, if I'm encouraging cultural appropriation because of the looks of my filters, and how do I feel when I see a Karen wearing it, for example. And to that, I just want to say that I think cultural appropriation doesn't come from the person who wears the filter or whatever. I think that cultural appropriation comes from the person who makes it. So having in mind that this was not built on the context of a cultural appropriation because it is my own culture, then I think that it should always be celebrated, worn, and enjoyed by everyone in the world, regardless of their cultural identity or their background. And I also think that this is a very interesting topic in relation to the metaverse and the representations of different bodies, of different races, of different identities. But my opinion in relation to that is always that appropriation doesn't come from those who wear it. Appropriation comes from those who design it and don't acknowledge the source of inspiration.
I have a burning question. Okay, we have a burning 9 minutes.
Open to anyone. I wanted to ask, what can digital art, digital fashion do to help create a healthy digital space? When I think of addiction to devices, addiction to gaming, a lot of the digital fashion outside of AR, mixed reality sort of systems, otherwise we are in the screen in some shape or form. And so I wanted to ask the group, what are some solutions that digital fashion can provide to undermine addiction? And game theory can certainly bring you in and not let you out, and there can be issues with micro interactions and sort of parallels to gambling and addictions. Does anyone have any ideas on how digital fashion can help the health?
I mean, it's such a paradox, right? Because we want people to interact with the screens with digital fashion. So how can we tell them, like, don't look at your screen when that's kind of like a living that goes into it. And I think my counter question is is it digital fashion's responsibility to educate people about using their devices in the right manner? Yeah. So like I think we all have that responsibility, that we definitely have to think about that. However, there's let's say a big paradoxical challenge to your question. Sorry,
I mean,
Ilana,
Gary, James McQueen and I actually worked on our digital fashion show during lockdown, and we both said that it was incredibly beneficial to our mental health working on it, because actually it gave us a creative outlet during a really challenging time. And that's why we chose to give back to the community, and we aligned with the UK's largest mental health charity. There's a lot of problems with mental health and fashion anyway, and that's why we wanted to raise awareness of that. Obviously, Gary James McQueen lost his uncle to suicide, and the pressure of putting on a physical show is enormous, especially with the frequency that historically fashion shows or fashion houses have done it. So doing it digitally, I think, although it was very challenging because we were kind of the first to do it in the way that we did, it was a lot less stressful and definitely less physically demanding than putting on a traditional fashion show would have been. And yeah, so and we both recognized, and especially Gary, that by creating a metaverse, we were giving someone somewhere to step into during a really sort of dark and oppressive time, and provide a kind of creative outlet and an immersive experience when we weren't even allowed outside at the time that we were creating it. So I don't really see the negative side of it. I think it's about recognizing the art of depression, which is actually why we chose to align ourselves with Mind Charity, because art is a form of therapy, as is fashion and expressing yourself. And it's important that we all continue to do that.
To Kerry's point, I definitely agree that, like, is it digital fashion responsibility to educate the consumer in relation to screen time addiction? But then at the same time, is it physical fashion responsibility to educate the consumer about the complexities of the supply chain? So I think it's a bit of it's a tough situation, and it's a very tough question. But I was just thinking like that digital fashion or virtual fashion or immersive fashion can be a moment of relaxation. It can be a guided meditation with the dress skirt flowing around your head and suddenly you feel better about yourself. Or as Leanne was saying, you can breathe in and breathe out and sort of see the environment around you changing. And that is also a process of relaxation and towards mental health. Or even we could create, I don't know, digital fashion garments that freeze your screen after a few times, a few minutes of exposure on Minecraft or on virtual reality games, and then it just freezes your screen for a bit. I definitely do not think that it is our responsibility, but I think that if we had a briefing based on that, we would be quite capable of delivering a sort of solution in a way, because clothes do sort of restrain us in a way, right? They impose some limits of places you should be or temperature or things like that. So how could then digital or virtual fashion also have those limitations in relation to screen time or the specific app that you are using? Yeah, just some crazy thoughts.
What I would add also, Damara said that buying digital clothes can help you to relax. And we know that there are people who go shopping because they have stress or depression and they buy physical garments and they never wear them and they just throw it away. And what environmental impact we have from this kind of shopping. So if we replace this shopping with a digital one, which has much less environmental impact, which can help us to get rid of stress, to buy a garment which shows our emotions right now and to help us to live these emotions. Maybe it's not that so bad. Yeah, maybe we can put limitations on the time we use on the app, but on the other side, there is also a positive impact from buying digital instead of buying, for example, physical.
As I have a young child, I think that we've all got a responsibility to build a more inclusive, diverse and sustainable future, and that comes from the education point of view, from the making, so I think that as much as the gaming question probably threw us all a little, I think that, you know, we're all charging forward, and all of us here, you know, within this panel, and even down to the people who are consuming and part of the dialogue, we all have a responsibility to build a more democratic and sustainable future.
What a crazy time to be alive, and what a pleasure to share it with you.